First, let me introduce myself. My name is Gavin Brown. I'm the head of the Registry Services division at CentralLink, and I'll be talking you through some of the thoughts that we have at CentralLink about the opportunities that ccTLDs can take advantage of to make effective use of the cloud for ccTLD registry operation. Just a brief explainer. The intention behind this webinar is to provide a very high level overview of cloud services and how they can be implemented in ccTLD registries. It's not a in-depth technical presentation, and we do assume that you have essentially no understanding of what the cloud is, because we want to make sure that we're addressing as wide a wider potential audience for this as possible. We are willing to take questions, and the Q&A system has been turned on. So if you have a question you would like to submit, please use the Q&A system, which is you'll find under the chat icon on the right hand side. Please go ahead and enter your question there, and we'll deal with them either as we go through the presentation or at the end, and there'll obviously be time at the end for further questions and comments as well. So let me just get on and start the presentation, and then we'll start working our way through it. Okay, so slides have disappeared, so I wonder what's happened there. Re-upload them. Here we go. Right. Okay. So let's just think about the current situation for many European ccTLDs. Many European ccTLDs are in a pretty good state from a kind of commercial and financial point of view. ccTLD business in Europe is relatively stable and secure. If you operate a ccTLD in Europe, you're likely to have substantial demand from your domestic audience, which is likely to be well developed. You're going to enjoy high renewal rates and relatively low levels of abuse. Certainly not zero abuse, but relatively low levels of abuse that can be reasonably well managed through relatively straightforward processes. The only downside really is that because it's such a mature and well developed marketplace, growth in domain volumes is low. It typically tracks the growth of the overall economy. So single digit percentages are pretty common in terms of the overall growth in the domains under management within each of those ccTLDs. And that naturally results in some of the ccTLD operators looking to diversify their businesses by adding additional DNS services or cybersecurity products that are kind of complementary or synergistic with the DNS services and registry services they provide, to diversify their business line so that they can achieve higher levels of growth than they would be available just through selling domain names. But it's also driven ccTLDs to look at the cost base for their business as well. So looking at outsourcing their infrastructure and or parts of their registry platforms in order to reduce their costs, because obviously if you can't increase your revenue through increase in volume, then you can protect your profitability of your business through reducing your costs. Many European ccTLDs continue to run their own dedicated registry infrastructure, and they also often run their own DNS networks as well. And they've using technology that they would have designed and built in-house over many years. So you look at some of the larger ccTLDs in Europe. The volume of domains that they support, the financial liquidity that provides them means that it's made sense for them to design and build their own solution to operate in-house and according to their own business needs. But it is a capital and labor intensive model. It means that those businesses need to employ and maintain teams of engineers who expensive, especially in the modern marketplace where there's continuing demand for that sort of talent and expertise, and it results in a capital and labor-intensive business model where you're continuously spending on servers, data centers, co-location, anycast networks, transit, and so on. As the business grows, you're investing in that infrastructure, operating it in-house, and then replacing it as it is deprecated over time. This has resulted in some ccTLDs looking to lift and shift. So they're moving their existing on-premise or co-location infrastructure into the cloud. And I'm going to talk a little bit on the next slide about what that looks like. First, just to make sure that we're all on the same page, I want to just come up with a definition of what the cloud is. It's been a concept that's been around for a very long time now, so I don't believe this is too this can be too controversial when we describe the cloud as other people's computers, and it's really when you choose to use the cloud, you're choosing to run your business on infrastructure or solutions that are provided by other people using their own systems rather than running them on your own infrastructure on your own computers. And the cloud business model can be broken down into three different tiers. The first is infrastructure as a service, which is at the lowest level. Secondly, is platform as a service, which runs on top of an infrastructure as a service platform. And then thirdly is software as a service. And this is the kind of model that the average end user will be most familiar with, because obviously not many people run their own email servers anymore. They like to use Hotmail or Gmail or Yahoo Mail. And so the end user is very used to using software as a service, where rather than running their own mail server or running an email client on their computer, they're just accessing everything through the browser and it comes to them over the network. Just a brief outline of what the different cloud models are, starting with infrastructure as a service. So this is the bare kind of nuts and bolts components of what every business's IT infrastructure is going to be. It's going to be servers, it's going to be networking, whether that's connectivity or networking solutions like load balancing and firewalls and that sort of thing, provided as a service where the cloud provider takes responsibility for managing the actual physical devices and equipment, and then provides access to those those components through an API or through software interface. So you can construct and build networks, virtual networks, physical network, virtual networks, using those abstractions, and don't have to worry about the actual physical machines. Those are held by the cloud service provider in a data center that you never see, that you never get access to, and you manage them entirely through network-based interfaces. And if you're looking at existing examples of providers like this, would be listed here. I've got DigitalOcean, and obviously AWS started out with the Elastic Compute Cloud, EC2, which is the basis of their entire cloud solution. And essentially what you're doing there is you're getting a virtual machine hosted on those networks, and then you can use that virtual machine for whatever you want. So you can take that virtual machine and turn it into a database server. You can use it to turn it into an application server. You can run a desktop computer on it if that was what you wanted to do. The virtual machine is entirely up to you to manage, and what you do with it is up to you. But the underlying physical infrastructure and the way that you access that device and the way it's provisioned is all managed by the cloud service provider. And this obviously provides a natural platform upon which to move from an existing on-premise or co-location infrastructure, where you're just taking existing components and virtualizing them, and then using the third-party platform infrastructure as a service platform to reproduce your existing on-premise or co-located infrastructure in a cloud. As I said before, the next step up from infrastructure as a service is platform as a service. And what we're really doing is we're moving up the stack. So while infrastructure as a service abstracts away hardware and network, then what platform as a service does is abstract away things like the operating system and the application runtime. So with a platform as a service, you might define your what you want to run as an application, which can be encapsulated inside a container. And then that container can be then deployed on a runtime environment that is completely self-contained, and everything below that environment is completely out of your purview in terms of your need to operate it. Examples of that are the Heroku as an earlier example of this sort of solution, and AWS Beanstalk. Again, that's a platform as a service solution based on top of AWS's infrastructure as a service. And you may well be familiar with things like Kubernetes as well, and Docker, which are solutions for managing fleets of containers running on either on-premise or third-party cloud platforms. One of the nice benefits of the platform as a service is that, as I said before, you're abstracting away a lot of the lower level stuff. So things like scaling are completely handled by the cloud provider. So you don't need to worry about building a load balancing system in order to horizontally scale your application as it grows. The service provider will take care of that for you. You obviously still have to design your software and maintain your software and the containers that it runs in, and you need to make sure that they are using the kind of data persistence and storage and database functionality required in order to implement the business logic. But the actual scaling of the application and the infrastructure that the application runs on is increasingly being hidden away from you. And that brings us finally to the very end of the kind of spectrum of different solutions that are available on the cloud, which is software as a service. And software as a service, the kind of poster boy for this is Salesforce. And really what Salesforce is a web application. You access it through a web browser. It replaces a traditional on-premise solution, but the entire experience is mediated through a browser. You don't have to worry at all about developing any software, writing code, deploying that code. You don't need to worry about any of the software dependencies. Worry about any of the security of it all. It's all handled by the SaaS service provider. And so again, what you're doing is you're giving up necessarily a degree of control over the lower levels of the stack, but then you're also giving up a lot of the responsibilities, and those responsibilities can sometimes be a drag on your business. And as I'm going to go through later, that can actually make things better for you in the long run. So, and to try and illustrate this is a breakdown of thinking about what you need as a business to run your operations on each of the different models. So if you ran your own owned and operated on-premise or co-located infrastructure at any sort of significant scale, then you're going to need to have within your organization engineering resources that are sufficiently qualified and specialized to do things like, for example, make sure that your data center is properly designed and scaled and scalable, and obviously physical security is then an issue as well. You have to worry about power and if you actually have a physical data center that you control rather than one that you're just renting, then you also need to think about things like cooling and all kinds of other things. You'll be running your own database, which means you'll need database administrators and engineers who can handle that as well. You'll be doing your software development, which means you need quality assurance processes. You'll need product management. You obviously need security because you'll have full responsibility for every element of the stack, right down from the network cables all the way up. And obviously, as any business, you'll also need your finance, your policy, your administrative and commercial teams, and your data teams as well. Now, let's say you took a decision to lift and shift and move your existing infrastructure onto an IaaS platform. So the hardware immediately stops being your responsibility, starts being someone else's. That does still mean that you need to maintain your own system and database admins. You need to maintain your software engineering as you did before, and all of the other kind of as you move up the stack from nuts and bolts up to bits and bytes, and then through up into kind of business level functions. You continue to need to maintain those resources within inside your organization and cover the cost of those, even though you've given up a little bit of control in terms of the nuts and bolts of your infrastructure. And then obviously the next step up would be to the platform as a service. With a platform as a service, you can get rid of some of the engineering resources or move them into other things. So you can become a little bit more agile in that you are not dealing with a sort of legacy infrastructure, you're primarily focused on software and developing your software. That does mean that you can move a little bit faster than some of the businesses that operate on the left-hand side of this table. But you do still need a significant in-house engineering resource, because you're maintaining the software, you're making sure that it's properly tested, you're making sure that it meets your requirements, you're also responsible for making it secure. But if you were to move to the far right-hand side of this table and run your business on a SaaS solution, then again, all of that stuff goes away, because the SaaS solution provider is responsible for things like security. It's responsible for the product meeting the requirements of the customer, which is you. Responsible for its software engineering. It's responsible for its QA, and that means that as a business, you can be much more focused on effective management of your business rather than your IT operations. So your business is going to be much more focused on achieving its commercial goals, on achieving its policy goals. And obviously for a ccTLD, where you're not necessarily interested in making as much money as possible, you can be more focused on achieving the mission of your ccTLD to represent your country, to help your country develop the online marketplace and the online sector for that country, and to raise digital literacy and so on and so forth. These are all things that ccTLDs commonly care about. And by outsourcing a lot of the kind of infrastructure sides of what the ccTLD does, then they can refocus on those areas much more closely. So in summary, I think it's worth recognizing that cloud-based businesses have the ability to be much more profitable than those that are still running on their own and operated infrastructure. They can be more agile, which means that they don't have the dead weight of legacy infrastructure and legacy software hanging around their necks. If they need to pivot to change their model to be dramatically different to the way that they were before, you've got to take all of that infrastructure with you. You can't turn everything off, leave it a year and a half, and then turn it all back on again. You've got to make sure that your services are available and your existing customers are continuing to be satisfied and happy. And so if you're reliant on your own operated infrastructure, your ability to adapt to a changing marketplace and to a changing environment is going to be impeded. First and finally, you'll be more secure. We've all gone through the experience in the last few years of making decisions about whether we really want to run our own mail servers or not. And a lot of organizations that used to run their own mail servers have realized very rapidly that unless you actually have a full-time email security and abuse management team, actually the costs outweigh the benefits. And so that sort of recognition that actually by putting it inside the perimeter of what you're responsible for, that puts a great deal of burden on you to ensure that those things are secure and that they are protected, can, as I say, significantly outweigh the benefits. And that's true of any piece of software, any system, any business system, whether that's email or finance or accounting or business intelligence or anything like that. If it's on your desk, then you have ownership of it, and that means you're responsible for when it works, but also when you're responsible for when it fails. And if you don't fully understand the system that you're responsible for, if you don't fully understand all its behaviors, all the ways it can fail, then the risk is that there are threats to your business that you don't know about, and you'll find yourself in trouble, which is why businesses are increasingly looking to outsource their systems, then their non-mission critical systems, to third parties who are experts in running those systems. So let's take that cloud model that I just outlined and apply it to the domain name registry world. Let's say you're a domain name registry and you have the need to run a domain name registry system. You can look at the three different cloud models and say, well, what does that look like for us? So, like I said before, the infrastructure as a service, that looks very much like a lift and shift. So you take your existing infrastructure design and you translate it into a virtual infrastructure. So a physical server becomes a virtual server, and a physical load balancer becomes a virtual load balancer, and so on. But more or less, everything runs the same. With the platform as a service, you need to do a little bit more work, because suddenly you're starting to make changes to the application environment for the registry software, which means you need to make sure that you can containerize it, that you can capture all of your dependencies, that you can understand how data flows around the system, so that they can be mapped onto the solutions that are provided by the cloud service provider. But at the third level, when you're using a software as a service solution, it means running your top level domain on a registry service provider or an RSP. And just to be clear, what is a registry service provider? Well, CentralNIC is a registry service provider. We're a SaaS solution for TLD registry operators. A registry service provider provides a fully managed registry infrastructure that could be dedicated or it could be shared, and it will include all of the key elements of any registry. So that includes the authoritative DNS and all of the things associated with that. It will include a shared registry system with an EPP interface and all of the other bits and pieces around that, and also things like access to registration data via WHOIS or RDAP. So this is where we get into the sales pitch. CentralNIC, as I said before, is a SaaS provider, an RSP SaaS provider, but we do an awful lot more than just the bare bones of providing those technical services. We provide a lot more than just a web-based interface that you can point and click at in order to run your registry. We provide a bespoke service to meet each of our clients' needs. We don't provide a one-size-fits-all. We provide a tailored solution for each one of our partners. We don't have a model where you get a monthly phone call from an account manager and a CSV report at the end of the month for all of your activity. We act as a partner to our registry clients. They have direct access to technical, policy, commercial, and marketing and financial teams. And we provide complete visibility on the operation and performance of our customers' TLDs through real-time reporting, through business intelligence solutions, through real-time data feeds, and through a variety of APIs that give access to all of that data. We provide financial support as well. We pioneered what's called the shared wallet model, where TLDs that run on our platform are all invoiced through a single billing system. So registrars who sell domains on TLDs on our platform get one invoice from us for every single one of the TLDs on our platform. That dramatically reduces the amount of administration that the registrars need to do in order to support the TLDs that we carry, and that makes our TLDs, our customers' TLDs, more attractive to those registrars and means they're more likely to onboard them. We provide consultancy and advice services to our registry clients. That can also include policy and commercial support. And we're also looking at a more managed service where rather than just providing the technology and a bit of advice, we're actually helping our registry clients with their business development, with their marketing, with their strategy, and so on. And that's an area where we're looking to work more to provide that sort of advice. As a registry service provider, we provide the largest distribution channel. So more registrars connect to us in order to sell domains on our platform than any other registry service provider, which means that if you're interested in getting access to as many registrars as possible, then we're a good choice to work with because we can give you through a click of a button access to more registrars than anyone else. And of course, we take pride in the fact that we are a very innovative and flexible company. We have, as I said before, pioneered a number of innovations in our industry, and we have a very open and transparent model of working with our partners, and that allows us to be flexible and that allows us to accommodate everyone, whether they are tiny islands in the middle of nowhere or giant GTLD selling tens of millions of domains every year. And we also are dedicated as a registry service provider. So CentralNIC Registry obviously is part of the wider CentralNIC group, but the registry itself, we focus entirely on running the best registry service platform in the world. And we don't have a portfolio of our own TLDs where we're competing with our customers. And that's another thing that I think is a big selling point for anyone looking to partner with someone in order to outsource some parts of their registry business. So that's pretty much the end of this presentation, and I am happy to receive questions at this point if anyone has any more questions. I should have said this right at the beginning. I do apologise, by the way. I am just recovering from COVID, so my voice is a little messy. And if I've not made sense to anyone, please let me know, and I will clarify anything that I've maybe not said very clearly. Do we have any more questions? Okay, so there's a question that's come in. I don't know if did it come through the main. I don't know. So the question I've got is about migrations, and the question is if a company or a ccTLD wants to move from one of these models to the other, what's involved in that process? Well, obviously, if you're operating on one of the kind of lower tier SaaS models, so if you're on one of the IaaS or PaaS models, then obviously you have a degree of control over that because ultimately you have reasonable level of control over the systems that your registry system is running on. And if you'd gone through the process of lifting and shifting and you're running in a sort of legacy system on an IaaS platform, then really to switch to upgrade to a PaaS platform, you really need to do an awful lot of work on refactoring your software. So you need to take the software that you've got and you need to start using it, adapting it so that it uses the kind of cloud native solutions rather than the existing legacy systems. So a good example of that would be something like databases. So it might be that if you've done a lift and shift exercise, your database is running in a virtual machine. And so you're spending an awful lot of money on a dedicated virtual machine, potentially a very large one, in order to run your database. Whereas cloud services like AWS or Azure will actually provide a dedicated database service that can be used much more efficiently. And that requires you transferring your registry database from that lifted and shifted virtual machine onto something like Amazon RDS or Aurora Global Database. The cloud providers also provide specialized and optimized cloud versions of common software components and common system components, things like caching, for example, where they will take care of things like scaling, global replication, and so on. And so it's a process of taking each component of your system and working out whether there's an equivalent solution that's available through your cloud service provider of choice, whether it's AWS or Azure or GCP, and making sure that they you can make a most effective use of those. And that's really important, actually. So you can't necessarily just do a lift and shift and then think we're in the cloud and everything's okay, because it's often very expensive. It's much better to start that process of continuing to move up the scale to running as, on platforms as a service. Otherwise, you'll be potentially very expensive, and there are better ways of or more efficient ways of running your business. But when it comes to migrating onto a registry service provider, the main thing is the migration of the data, and also making sure that the transition of things like registrar connections and so on is taken care of, and the registry service provider will be responsible for taking care of that. Now is probably not the right time to talk about migrations of RSP migrations, but we have done webinars on that in the past, and there's plenty of material on our website if that's something that's of interest. We are just over time now, so unless there are any more questions, I will bring this webinar to an end. Just once again, thank you for your time. If you have any further questions, please feel free to get in touch. The website is just showing up on the screen now, registry.com. Drop us an email and reach out to me if you want on social media. I'm available pretty much everywhere. I look forward to speaking to you soon. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.